Why does IntelliJ IDEA Debugger disconnect? Imagine you're trying to fix a tricky bug in your code, and suddenly your debugging session drops out just when you need it most. Frustrating, right? That's what we're here to solve. When working with IntelliJ IDEA, a popular integrated development environment, you might notice the debugger disconnects unexpectedly. This can happen for several reasons, and understanding these causes can help you keep your debugging sessions stable. First, let's talk about how you connect the debugger to your application. When you run your Java or Kotlin application in debug mode, the Java virtual machine must be started with specific arguments. These arguments tell the JVM to listen for debugger connections. For remote debugging, a common JVM option is agentlib. JDWP is equal to transport is equal to DT socket, server is equal to Y, suspend is equal to N, address is equal to 1001. If you set the suspend parameter to N, the JVM won't wait for the debugger to connect and might close the debug port after starting, causing the debugger to disconnect quickly. On the other hand, if you set suspend is equal to Y, the JVM pauses until the debugger attaches, keeping the session alive longer. Misconfiguring these options is a frequent reason for disconnections. Next, consider the lifecycle of your application. If your program crashes or terminates unexpectedly, the debugger will naturally disconnect because the process no longer runs. This is common when debugging short scripts or applications that exit after completing their task. Ensuring your application stays active during debugging is key to maintaining the connection. Sometimes, the problem isn't with your code but with the IDE or the platform. Certain versions of IntelliJ IDEA or the debugger engine itself may have bugs that cause disconnections. For example, some users report that the debugger shuts down immediately after launch on Windows systems, even though it works fine on Linux. These issues can be related to incompatibilities with build tools like Maven or SBT, or even specific IDE versions. Keeping your IDE, Java Development Kit, and build tools up to date can help avoid these bugs. Network issues also play a role. When debugging remotely, the debug port must be accessible and free of conflicts. If another process is using the same port or a firewall blocks the connection, the debugger can disconnect unexpectedly. Always verify that the debug port is open and not used by other applications. Another common cause is idle timeout or debugger state problems. If your debug session remains idle for a long time, some IDEs or platforms might automatically disconnect or become unresponsive. You might see the debugger still appear connected but not respond to commands. Restarting IntelliJ IDEA often resolves this. Finally, your run or debug configuration matters. If you are running your application through build tools like Maven or SBT, incorrect or incompatible configurations can cause disconnections. For example, debugging a Spring Boot application via Maven might fail if the debug options aren't set correctly. Matching your debug setup with your build environment ensures smoother sessions. To avoid these issues, always double-check your JVM debug arguments, especially the suspend setting, to control whether the JVM waits for the debugger. Keep your application running and avoid closing it prematurely. Use compatible versions of IntelliJ IDEA, Java Development Kit, and build tools. Make sure your debug port is available and not blocked by firewalls. If your debugger becomes unresponsive, restart the IDE. And finally, align your run and debug configurations with your build setup. By understanding these common causes and following these tips, you can keep your debugging sessions steady and focus on fixing those tricky bugs efficiently.